Hello, I'm Robyn. Welcome to the Calgary Music Sound Off Summit. You might be wondering why you're here. And that is to talk about records. And everybody loves talking about records. I also love talking about records, and I make them, so that's why I'm here and not somebody else. So, a little bit about me. I'm Robyn. My company is called Spade Records. I'm a lathe cut record maker. And I've been cutting records since 2018. You can come on in if you want to. Okay. And I worked with some of the biggest bands and artists in Canada and also the world. Because of the pure niche timing confluence of the universe wanting me to succeed, I don't know. But here I am. I've worked on over 350 different projects since I started cutting records, which is thousands of records, one by one in real time, including this record pictured in the tiny picture, which is a 7-inch single that I did for the Arkells for Christmas in 2020. I don't know, time is a construct. And I had to do 500 of them, one by one in real time, for 22 days consecutively of 9.5 hours of listening to the same 2 songs over and over and over again. But look at how wonderful it looks. It's very cute. So, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys about is the different ways to make records and how that might fit into the way that you might want to make physical product for your people. And this year I also launched a record label because I'm a monster and I can't stop working. And I thought because of controlling the means of production, it might be cool to help out some artists that I know and love and be able to put out some records for them too. Just because as a thought experiment. So, physical copies. Should you make them? That's always kind of the number one question. People's expectations of physical product is a little bit different sometimes than reality. And because I'm one person that runs my own shop, I answer all the emails, I make all of the records, I cut all the labels, I cut the spindle holes and put them all together in tiny little beautiful packages and mail them to your house. I also answer all my emails about questions that you might have. Whether that actually leads to us doing business together is one thing, or whether that leads to me referring you to a pressing plant because the quantity or whatever that you want is much exceeded. That's something that I will do for you because I love you and I want you to succeed. So if anybody has any questions at all at any time, put up your little paw because I'm sure everybody does have questions. So don't be scared, we're all friends. Okay, so one of the things, these are kind of some of the questions that I like to start the vinyl process with. What physical product is best for your audience? You need to know if you're going to be able to sell those copies, how many copies you're going to be able to sell, what price point you're going to be able to sell them at, and whether your music actually translates into physical product. Not every song or album in the world can be cut into a physically playable record. And I want everybody to know that. That is based on mastering, and mastering is a very real thing. Please don't use Lander because it makes our lives very, very difficult because it doesn't always translate into a beautifully cut record. There's parameters that make records cuttable. Noise records sometimes are really, really great, sometimes really aggressive, but if you have your bass completely panned into 180 degrees phase, that's not a cuttable record. And if you were thinking about doing like a beautiful ambient field recording that has bass way, way out here to maintain your cinematic universe that you're living in, that's not going to cut into a nice record. I'm going to have to change it and change your vision and the way that that music is being presented, and that's when I reject that record and say we can't do this because it's not the way that you want it to be listened to. So, other things that you need to know: do you have a label or other support? If you want to make records, sometimes your label will want you to make records, sometimes they will not want you to make records, sometimes they'll pay for those records to be made. And also, are you in the right part of your recording process? Vinyl takes time. Records take time to make. There are, if you work in the pressing plant system, there's like 27 people attached to making every single copy of that record. If you're working with me, it's one person, but I still have 350 records to make ahead of yours, so it's still going to take some time. So talking about whether you want to make physical product early in your recording process is super important because then you can start making those connections, looking at pressing plants, looking at options, talking about budget. Then also, do you have the infrastructure for selling? Are you going on tour? Do you want to cart records across Canada with you? Do you want to drop ship those records across Canada? Do you want to do a short run of records? Do you want to do, oh my God, CDs? Do you want to do tapes? And I know, everybody's like, tapes, what? Bear with me. Also, do you have a Bandcamp? Do you have a website? Do you have somebody that is willing to shill for you to sell all of your physical product? And then lastly, is this a proper expenditure for your band? Do you have $3,000 laying around as an independent artist that you're like, sure, take this. I don't know when I'm going to get this money back. It's fine. I don't need it. Because then vinyl might be right for you. Okay. These are some facts about the industry right now as a little time capsule. So, as we know, digital downloads are starting to wane because everybody thinks that they can just stream music and then they have it, right? So, not all of the download codes that you're stuffing into little things are going to be utilized. People aren't downloading as much as we think that they are. So, with that, record sales have continued to increase for the last 17 years, over and over and over and over again. Sometimes between 20 and 20% over top of the year prior. So that's why vinyl is a good idea. Vinyl accounts for 71% of physical music format revenue. So people that are making money off of making physical format, whether that's CDs or tapes, vinyl is the one that they're selling the most of and making the most money. Also, CD sales have decreased about 18% from last year. And last year was the first year that vinyl actually eclipsed CD sales since CD's inceptions. So vinyl is back on the rise, even though CDs are kind of like still sexy. Millennials are 42% more likely to buy cassette.
42% more than what?
Than Gen Z, than
Oh, I see.
Boomers, who still might have a tape deck in their car.
Yeah.
God forbid an 8-track. So those are things to think about, and also potential ways to think about doing your merch. So whether you're going to do a 3-way split, whether you're going to do a CD like 100 CDs, 100 tapes, 100 records, and then offer them as a bundle. That's kind of what's happening in some of the major labels too. So looking at trends and seeing what people that are in your genre might be selling is a good way too. Travis Scott just set a new record for tour merch. He sold $1 million in one night. I'm waiting for the breakdown on what the vinyl was. But he did that 2 nights in a row. Taylor Swift hasn't even done that. So, I mean, hip hop is a thing. And it's one of the fastest growing physical mediums for genres as well. And then 50% of the buying public don't own a turntable. So sometimes you make records, they might not get played. That's just how it is. And I make these, and I'm like, I labor over them and I listen to them in real time and you're going to love it. And then it just sits on someone's shelf and I'm like, that's fine. Look at how beautiful they can be.
Yeah.
Right? So, and yes, this is actually for Nancy Sinatra. It's not a bootleg. I did it for her for realsies. And I did 3 titles of them. So, and that was a direct-to-consumer thing, and we'll go over direct-to-consumer as well. But so streaming is really big overseas right now. If you have your geographical information turned on for all of your websites and things like that, you might see that more of your populace, more of the people that like your band, are overseas. So then you have to think about shipping, and shipping records is a bitch. So here's some other fun facts about CDs, pros and cons. So quick turnaround, 2 to 7 weeks, depending on quantity. High audio quality, which if you are dealing with audiophiles, if you perhaps play jazz, CDs might be the right avenue for you still. Unless you are getting your beautiful band recorded by somebody like Steve onto tape, and then you can guarantee that analog chain for all of those nerds. That's the only way that they're going to pay that price point for that vinyl that you want, okay? CDs have flexible quantities. 100 to 2,000 is common. That price point is also $300 Canadian to $3,000 Canadian with respect to those quantities with shipping as well. But they are easy to ship because they're teeny tiny. But also teeny tiny print. So you're limited to like what credits you can put on here as well, and inserts, lyrics. I mean, if you have readers or bifocals, maybe that's not a problem for you. I am staving that off for as long as I can. And they retain a fan interest. So the price point is still nice, so you can chuck a CD on a merch table and still sell it for $10. Somebody still might pick it up, right? As a sidebar, I'm also a production manager with one of the largest promoters in Canada. So part of my job is being on the ground, doing production 4 times a week this week, and talking with merch and seeing what is happening in merch. So I can tell you that this is founded in actual being in here, not just hiding in my studio, giving you my opinions. Okay, so the ability to play CDs is a super con, because how many people have a car? Show of hands, anyone have a car? Yeah, okay. Do those cars have CD players? There you go. So, and I mean, anybody that has a home stereo system now too, do you have a turntable? Do you have a CD player? Which one are you going to, we don't all have the giant stacks of our parents from the 70s anymore, where you have a tape deck and a receiver and a CD player and a turntable, right? Like, who has room for that in our teeny tiny little apartments? So that's getting harder, so they still might just pick up a CD to support you. The minimum still might be a lot more than you think that you can rationally sell in a short time frame. I remember when my band was touring and doing records and things, and I was like, 500 CDs, what? And that was the minimum back in the old days. And that's what we went for. And guess what? When I was packing up all of my stuff to move to Toronto in 2019 to do my mastering apprenticeship, I still had like 350 of them, and we had not played a note since 2013. So those are things that you need to think about, if you want to ship your record collection like I did across the country and back, that's one thing, because that's the records that you know and love, but like your own, staring you at the face, showing you your abject failure, that's another thing completely, let me tell you. Does anybody have any questions about CDs so far? Yeah.
So my question was, could they also be slightly more durable than vinyl? Because I feel like the labels on the CDs are very easy to chip, like the top, and then it kind of ruins.
What are you doing to your records is my first question. Generally, labels on pressed records are paper. So they're not as durable as a coating on a CD, because those are like UV cured and coated. So those are way more durable. Records have to be treated like little tiny plastic babies. But CDs do too. If you scratch that optical coating, that's when you get skips and that kind of stuff. But also CDs degrade as well. So that's the wonderful thing about records. As long as you treat them nicely and house them nicely and clean them occasionally, they will endure for all of time. I have records in my collection that are shellacs, which are like the super breakable ones from 1904, and they're still kicking. So it all depends on how bad you're manhandling them. Tapes. Tapes, quick turnaround, 3 to 4 weeks, again, depending on quantity. They have a decent audio quality. Again, kind of on the lo-fi end, but still can be kind of cool. Flexible quantities down to 10, up to 2,000. Cost effective, $100 with shipping to $2,500. They are easy to ship because they're teeny tiny. You can customize them and create variants. You can do silly colors, and then you can break that down and do a bunch of silly colors. You can do different like cases as well. Also, the J cards, you can do a J card, or you can flip these babies out for a full lyric sheet, and sometimes it depends on how good your eyes are again, but you can put all your credits in there, and that's nice, because everybody wants to be credited for their work. They are a small, easy way for fans to support you as well. They can grab a tape off your merch table for $5 and feel like they did a good thing, okay? Not everybody has the ability to play tapes. And it might just be a performative purchase. So they can't listen to it, but they like you. They're gonna give you your money, but then this is just gonna sit somewhere. And this is easier to hide and put somewhere. They can be like, I remember that I got something at the, oh yeah, here it is. So, and then the hunt is on for the tape deck. But anyway, okay. So, I have a study, and I'm happy to send it to anybody. I have a stack of cards up here with my email and my phone number. You guys can all cruise by and grab one, and we can all be best friends after. And I'm happy to send you this Luminate study. But we found that, Luminate found that the direct-to-consumer is the hot way to buy records, specifically. And that's the way that people are finding a bigger, better, more profitable audience. So that direct-to-consumer is sometimes Bandcamp, sometimes it's your own website. Sometimes, I mean, if you have more than 10,000 followers on Instagram, that's your swipe up and purchase right now. Okay, they're not ordering product from labels unless that label is like a person and like is engaged and has a direct website and it is easy to navigate. And like this one is a specific example of that. We did 100 direct to her fan club, and that was it. For Nancy Sinatra, it was like, I mean, for me, it was a big deal. So, and I was getting harassed for like other copies from all around the world, but I was like, oh, there's only 100. I just gave them to Nancy, and she can do what she wants with them. So 1 in 9 album sales last year in the US was direct to consumer, not from a record store either. Okay. This is the big fact that I think everybody should pay attention to if you're making music. In the first half of 2023, there was 112,000 new tracks released every day, every single day. How are you differentiating yourself out of that crop, and how are you going to sell records to those people diving through all of those streams, right? So that's why streaming is one thing, physical sales are another, and they don't always correlate. So yeah, that's only 3% of the major labels too. So 112,000 songs, and only 3% of those are major labels putting those up. So that majority is independent artists flooding the internet with their music every single day. And I'm glad that you do it. It keeps us all in business. But now we're to getting to records. Okay, so records or vinyl, never vinyls, because record people will be like, what? No. All right, pros of records. Highly desirable, super collectible, superior audio quality, but then again, I'm biased. Flexible quantities from 1 to 2,000. There's 2 ways to make records. There's lathe cuts, which are short run, cut one by one, lovingly in real time. And then there's pressing plants. That's factory. That is plastic molding. That is, you're getting 100 records in 45 minutes. They are easy to customize. They're easy to create variants. You can get splatter. You can get color and color. You can get 3-way color. I can show you guys another slide with ad nauseum. There's larger packaging, so you can put photos in, lyrics in, all the credits to tell all of the wonderful stories of all of the people that helped you make your little baby. And then there's also multiple formats. So 7-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch. Not every single plant in the world creates 7-inch records anymore, and a lot of them don't do 10s. So if you have your heart set on doing a punk rock split 10-inch record, you're very limited to your choices. And then, yeah, there's more than one way to cut record or make records, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so cons. Not everybody has turntables. They'll still buy your records. The price point is on the rise, but I mean, every single thing in the world is getting more expensive. All of the people that are involved in making records deserve to make those wages too. Maybe it's a hot take, but that's why prices are going up as well. Turnaround times. During the pandemic, there was a lot of things about record pressing plants being choked and 2 years out and 3 years out, and everybody blamed Adele, and then everybody blamed Taylor Swift, and it was not those 2 ladies that did everything to the universe, but there are some independent record pressing plants that had nothing to do with either one of those records, and they were still booked 18 months out. So now, the average turn times for most pressing plants in the world is 12 to 16 weeks. And that's from you contacting your people and having your assets that day that you contact them and are ready to go. And then in 16 weeks, you will have your records in your hands, barring any problems. Okay. Again, shipping and packaging. Not everybody has a giant cardboard factory behind their houses. Shipping records demands a lot of cardboard. Trust me. Packaging records, again, is a whole nother thing. If one of your fans on the other side of the world gets a dent corner, believe me, you are going to hear about it, and you are going to have to send them something to replace it with. The minimum is still kind of high, depending on how you're going to make those records. If you're going to get a pressed run, those minimums are shifting because pressing plants have started to change their minimums because their downtimes are so long to change colors, to change stampers. And I can talk to you a little bit more about that. But you still might, so you might want to make 50 records, but you're going to have to make 200 because that's what the plant demands. And then, as we were discussing before, weight, space, transporting. Okay? I'm sure everybody has some records around here that they've been carting around for a while. So, and now a checklist for physical media. So these are the things that you kind of have to have or have to have in your brain before you start this journey. Otherwise, it's going to be derailed and take a lot more time than you think it's going to. So you have to have the appropriate masters or ownership of those masters. That can sometimes be a label discussion. That sometimes is just a discussion between you and your bandmates because you're not on a label. What your budget is, what your timeline is, design aspects. You need to get the templates. You need to talk to graphic designers if you are not one, because those templates need to be delivered to the appropriate people in the appropriate files. Otherwise, they're going to be rejected. When they get rejected, it will cost you more money and time. Research, research, research. Who's cutting your record? Where is that record getting shipped? Are you dealing with a broker? Do you want to deal with a broker? Should you deal with a broker? In my opinion, no. You shouldn't deal with a broker. I can help you. Oh, I promise. Referrals. Talk to other bands. Talk to other artists. Have you made records? Did you like your records? Where did you get your records made? Oh, I like this color, etc., etc., etc. And then you can talk to the people that made their record. Or, oh my God, don't make your record with these guys. It was a horror show. And very often that happens. So steer the conversation to another pressing plant. A lot of people don't know, but we have a pressing plant here in Calgary as well. It's very sneaky. It is very sneaky that we do have one. And they're lovely. Cost comparisons as well. Is it cheaper to get them in town? Do you want to get them shipped from Vancouver? Do you want to get them made in Portland? Do you want to get them made in Edmonton when that plant eventually comes online in 2024? Do you want to get them made in Quebec City? Because we have 7 pressing plants in Canada. Lots of options. And then choose your manufacturer from there. And then there's things to consider with all of those things. So, making records. I brought a couple of examples. So this is a press record. This, I'm shilling for myself, is the record on my label that I just put out. This is my artist. She's originally from Calgary. Her name is Rena Kozak. She lives in Montreal.
Yeah, Rena.
Yeah, Rena. Her artist name is Child Actress. So, I just got these pressed for her. And they are beautiful. Her record had to be done and ready to submit on August 10th in order for us to get them on November 1st. Okay? So that's like just as a time kind of idea for everybody. I mean, everybody in this room has probably held a press record, so I'm not gonna pass this one around, but you can come look at it after if you want. And then here is a record that I made for a little person called Priyanka, the winner of Canada's Drag Race. I have made all of the records in her catalog, all the ones in her discography. So I'm gonna hand this one around. It's a single-sided record, so you can, don't touch the grooves, but you can handle the back, no problem. So there's a couple differences between press records and lathe cut records. Press records are made by molds and melting plastic. Lathe cut records are made by having a blank that is already created in a plastics factory, cut down by laser, CNC, and shipped to me with like a nice little coating on top of the front and the bottom. And then I cut this record in real time, one by one. Whoa. My records are always flat because they come from a factory and they're always 180 grams at 12 inches or the appropriate weight at 7 or 10. I get to look at that blank before I cut it so I know whether it's warped or not, so warp ones don't obviously go out of my shop. Most of the lathe cutters in the world are the same because we only have 3 suppliers for plastic in the entire world for all of us that do what we do. So we're limited. We're able to get some colors sometimes. We're pressing plants. You can make all number of different colors. You can make blends because you're melting that plastic. So you can create all of those little blends and different effects and things like that. But we're not able to do those with lathe cut records. I can do like a bitchin' picture disc. Absolutely. Great picture disc. Again, you can check this one around because it's a display copy. But as you can see, like it's a thick record. The images are on the inside. So unlike pressed records, they sound amazing because the groove has no interference with the picture. So when you're pressing a record, you put the labels inside, and then there's 2 stampers, and I can show you what stampers look like as well. It's like the polka dot door, hey? Wow. Yeah, so press records go in between 2 stampers, and then you melt a puck of PVC in between those stampers, and then that is what your record comes out as. So, some other. There's the stamper. No, it's not. Where are you? There it is. Aha. Okay, so this is a stamper. So, every record that you're going to make, regardless of which way you decide to make it, lathe cut or pressed, so you start out cutting a record. It just depends on what medium you're going to cut it into. So mastering, all the way back to the origin of mastering, was cutting music into a record, and that was mastering. Now we've distorted it a little bit, unintended, into digital mastering and mastering for other formats. But this is what's called a lacquer disc. There's 3 ways to master. You can cut into a lacquer, you can cut into copper, or you can cut directly into plastic to make records. Okay, so every single record starts with the cutting process. Every single record starts with the cutting process by a mastering engineer who is going to look at your files and love your files and shape your files to be played on a record ultimately. So knowing who is cutting your record is one of the most critical parts of making records, in my opinion. If you need a reference, please let me know. I know all of the cutting engineers in the world because there's only like 200 of us. It's crazy. For all of the records that are getting made every single day across the world, there are like 200 mastering engineers that are cutting those records. If you're going to cut lacquer, that's cut by a person, where we can manipulate the groove size, we can manipulate the volume, we can create a smaller gap in between things when we know that it's really, really, really soft and we can get away with that, or we can widen those grooves out and give you more room and more space for bass or whatever you need, okay? These are questions that your mastering engineer should be asking you after they listen to your music too. And they'll want you to do that. Steve, can you take that? So a lacquer is highly combustible nitrocellulose coating on an aluminum disc, okay? Every single lacquer is like that. There is only 1 producer of lacquers in the entire world. There was 2. And in 2020, on February 8th, the one in California burned to the ground, right at the beginning of the pandemic. The record industry was shooketh. So that's 1 pinch point. Lacquers, yeah? Okay. The other way to cut records is into copper. So same kind of aluminum substrate, but it's a copper coating. So that, when you see your records are direct to metal mastered, that's the metal that it's getting mastered into, okay? So you have a lacquer and you cut an A side and you cut a B side. When I do a lathe cut record, I cut the A side and the B side on the same record. So it's much more stressful for sure, but it's also, it allows me to skip some of the processes for pressing records. So my records don't need to be plated and turned into stampers to be able to be transformed into a playable record. My records are playable as soon as I give them to you, okay? So that's one of the reasons that you might consider lathe cuts over press records, because the time that's needed is a little bit abbreviated depending on where you are. Yeah.
I think you just answered it, but the lathe mastering is
Yeah.
slightly shorter time?
It can be, yeah, because my records are playable immediately. So, I mean, I could make you one today and hand it to you and you could go play it. Yeah, whereas if we were pressing records, I would cut the master, which I don't do, but we would cut the master and then it would have to be sent away to a plating process, and then it would get plated and turned into stampers, and then the stampers would have to go to a pressing plant to be able to be pressed, and then you would get that record. And that's why they don't do just one copy at pressing plants, because it takes so long and many dollars to get to that point.
Right.
Okay? Yeah.
And I apologize, because I'm gonna duck out to the
Not at all.
next one, but I wanted to ask this question first.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, back in the day, we used to sell CDs and I hated it.
Yep.
Because I hate asking people for money, and also I just like drinking when I get off the stage.
Sure.
So, if I was gonna buy this, it's strictly because I don't wanna die with no vinyl.
Yeah.
There's like 100 people who would notice if I stopped making music, and I want them to have a piece of me.
Yep.
So it's vanity, basically.
Sure. All
so-
vinyl is, absolutely.
So two-part question. One is, what's your minimum run and price point?
One
And,
is my minimum.
okay, good.
Yep.
That's nice.
Yep.
And second, I like use a lot of samples.
Yep.
And I morph them and cut them and chop them and do stuff, and it's good enough for Spotify, right?
Yep.
Are you gonna be like, I think I heard the bass note from the beginning of Drive My Car by Beatles, or are you just gonna be like, no, I don't think I did?
I mean, the thing with samples and those kind of things is if it is altered by 15%, then copyright doesn't apply.
All right.
So that's why Spotify doesn't have a problem with it, because their algorithm would catch it way before any like human ears would. So if you have unchecked samples, that's why. So you should
They
be
bust you on movie lines, though.
Yeah, of course they do.
Okay, I'm gonna take your card before I.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. So yeah, go ahead.
So the lathe cut one has better quality sounds.
It can. I mean, it's kind of equal, right? So it's cutting records regardless. I mean, sometimes people find that there's a little bit.
But there's also.
Depends on how audiophile you want to get. I've cut records that have pleased audiophiles, and I have cut records that I've been shouted down from the mountaintops for. I don't know that that was specifically my cut, if it was the music and how it was mastered, because there are different ways to master for vinyl. You need to not deliver me a brick wall of sound. I need a dynamic master that has headroom. That's what I need to create a beautiful record. And right now, I'm finding that I'm getting a brick wall wave form that is this. And it's impossible to make a good record out of that. It is simply mirroring the digital copy to what I'm able to cut, because that is often people's reference points. How does it sound digitally? Well, the record sounds different. Oh, really? Oh, that's weird. Do you know what I mean? Because you haven't heard your record on vinyl before. I'm making it for you. So your reference point is digital, which makes sense, but you have to understand that the record will sound a little bit different because it's not a digital copy. So mastering for sure is like the number one point. If you give any mastering engineer that cuts records a great master, we can make a great sounding record out of it.
And so when you purchase a record,
Yeah.
can you tell when you get a record
Yeah.
how it was made, like pressed, or
Generally, yeah.
how
Yeah.
it's from the sound or the way it looks?
From the way that it looks. I mean, there's indicators on whether a record is pressed or whether it was cut as well, like a lathe cut, because we all have like our little signatures that we put in dead wax to show what we've done, but there's also catalog numbers. Certain plants have different catalog numbers and the way that they organize their stampers. So just by being an egregious nerd, I know what those mean, so I can navigate where that was made and who cut it. Now,
I wanted to ask, my understanding, with the understanding I have, because I mix.
Yeah.
I've never mixed for a vinyl product before.
yeah,
But my understanding is that sometimes the order of songs are laid out.
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
Do you?
great question.
Do you assist with that pre-mix, or do you kind of like, how do you work that?
Well, because mastering is very often the last part of the like creative chain and very much the first part of the manufacturing chain, we're left out of that conversation a lot of times. So that's why it's nice to be contacted early and say, oh, hey, we're making records. And then we can say, okay, here's why we want to talk about order. So you always want to have your most dynamic banger of a song at the edge of the record, which means the first song. So like your A1, your B1, B2, A2, those need to be your big bangers that have all of your crazy licks and giant drum solos and all of that kind of stuff. And then your tender little love songs need to be the ones closer to the inside of the record or the end of the side. Side order is important, also time. We can generally put between 18 to 20 minutes comfortably on the side of a record. Please don't tell me that you have a 54-minute record and you want to make records and you want it to be on one 12-inch record, because it's not going to happen. Or it's going to be so quiet, you're going to have to only play it in a library that's hermetically sealed, nowhere close to the freeway. Because it's going to have to be so quiet to be able to get all of that information onto a disc that you're not going to love it and I'm not going to love it, okay? So those kind of considerations are appropriate as well. And that's why sometimes you'll see tracks for digital only, and there's only 8 of the tracks of the 10 tracks on the record. Does that make sense?
So just to finish my question,
Yeah.
then, would if I was mixing a record and I know it's going to vinyl,
Yeah.
would I be engaging you pre-mixing it, or?
I mean, sometimes it's never going to be like a really long discussion unless you're like, hey, will this fit on one side, or how should this like track order go? Will this cut nicely? Sometimes those are like really great questions to have, and they can be very simple answers, or sometimes we'll have to listen to the way that you have made it and then say, oh, I would move this one here and I would move this one here. Sometimes we can do that just by looking at the waveforms, especially if it's in separate tracks and not just a full side. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a way to learn about how to master records and stuff?
I mean, yeah, you can go to school for it, or you can do it the way that I did it, which I don't recommend, which was buying your own equipment and then like being punk rock and doing it, and then just finding people that would take you in from the cold and put you under their wing and allow you to ask them stupid questions all day. Mastering it's a weird part of the industry. It's very much the like dark arts, because it's very much optimization for consumption. So there's different mastering for streaming, there's different mastering for CD, there's different mastering for YouTube, there's different mastering for vinyl. I mean, any kind of audio school will teach you how to master. And then it's just mastering after that, and learning and listening and finding out what works.
And then Teenage Engineering recently released a home lathe cut machine.
Yeah.
5 inches. Is that good? Would that be a cool thing to get to learn?
I mean, the only way that you learn how to cut is by cutting. It took me about 1,000 records to get good. Or decent, passable, I don't know. I have raging imposter syndrome, so I'm a terrible person to ask also. But that shows you the process of cutting, but it doesn't give you any like feedback, because you can't actually manipulate any of the variables that are going into that record. And the grooves are so small that unless you have a really great microscope, which we do, you're not going to be able to see how the grooves behave and what's going on there. But I mean, they're fun. They're fun as hell, for sure. Yeah. I mean, cut all the records, absolutely. But yeah, side order is definitely important. Talking to your mastering engineer and like finding a mastering engineer is really, really great. That's why I recommend looking at records that you love and seeing if that mastering engineer is credited. What a concept. But sometimes the person that mastered the record is not always the same person that cut the record. And that sucks, because there's some really brilliant cutting engineers out there that have not been credited on that record jacket. The only place that they're credited is on Jacksta or on Discogs. So that's why I'm saying research. If there is a person that there's a record that you love and you're like, this slaps, contact that mastering engineer. Guaranteed, they'll be like, oh, you liked that? Yeah, cool, no problem. Send me your stuff, we can do it. Because they're not inaccessible. Mastering engineers are like really weird hobbits, but they love to interact with people that want to do records, for sure. Is there anybody else have any questions? Steve.
Mine's more of a business question.
Yeah.
With the shift, like being a vinyl layer, the shift over the last few decades has definitely been direct to consumer.
Sure.
So is that creating a pocket niche for the small lathe cutters? And because vinyl is trophies.
Yep.
Like for example, I'm just finishing a jazz album. There's about 16 people involved.
Yep.
You know, instead of getting a plaque or a trophy engraved, 16 vinyls as a presentation. How do you manage the margins and the time frame of juggling all that variation of cutting?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of give and take with amenities sometimes. Sometimes it's like, do you want to do full packaging? Because I have printers that can do a full package. We can do like a really nice jacket, like that Priyanka jacket. That's full packaging that came from me. I print labels in-house sometimes. Some artists that I work with have done their own labels. They've done their own inserts. It can be punk rock AF. It's awesome. Some people have like silk screened the back of a single-sided record, which looks really cool too. So, I mean, the nice thing about lathe cuts is that you can kind of customize them to be in a certain price point, or you can make them retail ready to go. And then that's a higher price point, but I mean, it also enters into the conversation where it's a bespoke, limited edition. All of those buzzwords are very much in play when you market a lathe cut versus a press record.
And so I did cassette duplication pre-internet.
Yeah.
Most of those orders, you know, D2C are coming through internet orders or things. I'm just seeing that volume coming in, how to juggle that for time expectations and cost margins. Like if you've got 20 indie bands that all of a sudden want to press 40 indie copies.
Yep.
And there's X amount of timeline because they can't go to a large whack press. Mm-hmm. I mean, how does that juggle as a business model? Because now you're running 24/7.
Well, I mean, that's exactly it. It's like the first question that anybody always asks is, how is this scalable? And it's really not. And that's why it's short run only. And that's why when people are like, oh yeah, well, give me a quote for 200. And I'm like, you don't want me to do 200 because they are real time, one by one. It's not scalable. I cut it off at 50 because A, it's going to take me 50 hours of listening to your record time after time after time after time after time. I love you. I do. I love your records. I do. But that's a lot for one human. It is a lot for one human. It's also ear fatigue. And you don't want me to press past the boundaries of my ear's abilities because then I'll start missing distortion. And that's what happens in real time. When I'm cutting that record, I'm cutting with a teeny tiny little diamond that is getting slowly eroded by the plastic that I am cutting into. And so that manifests as distortion, usually in the high-end frequencies. Not really in the bass, but in the high end. And that's where you're going to start losing audio quality.
Your QA is real time?
It is real time, baby. 2 seconds after that cutter head, that is where the playback stylus goes, and that is on my ears all day. Yeah.
You mentioned you needed headroom when you get a master, like how much?
I mean, give me your best, and I'll do the rest. I will always try and make the hottest record that I can that will play.
Like in terms of actual audio outputs or whatever?
I mean,
dBs or whatever?
Yeah, like the loudness wars has completely distorted, again, our understanding of what loudness is. And I mean, it's just, everything is usually, if you give me like a normalized 0, that's great, and I will just go from there.
Oh.
All the records that come out of my shop are usually +3, +4, like playable on playback, like on a home system.
Okay.
So I'll try and make a hot cut all the time. I want it to be a banger, just like you do. I don't want it to be but there's limitations to records. They're physical manifestations of our music. And you need space for bass. You need, like, the high frequencies just rattle in the very, 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 very top of that record. So you need to give me space and depth and time to be able to, like, craft you a good one. But to answer your question, Steve, right now, I'm booked into April for those considerations. It's like, 40 hours of a record is like, I mean, I don't work a regular 40-hour week, baby, no. Sometimes if you are on a hot streak with a record, I will work that record for 10 hours. And I will do as many copies as I can until I drop. And then I'll go back the next day and do it again. But I'm always trying to meet people's expectations, but sometimes expectations, it's a physical process, it's a mechanical process. Sometimes things break, sometimes things go wrong, just like at pressing plants. All of these things go wrong all of the time. The only thing that's great is they have a backup press that they can pivot to and go to another one and take those plates out and do it. I have another lathe, I can do that as well, but I'm still only one person, so if I get hit by a car, your records aren't coming for a little while, and I'm going to ask for the consideration that that is okay. Yeah.
What's a short order of like 50, 12-inch, two-sided records going to cost? Roughly, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, like with packaging and like a single side, like up to 20 minutes. I mean, I can only reference the quotes that I've given out because I never quote off the top of my head, because math is hard and I work in the music business for a reason. I'm not a statistician, but I quote labor based on your side rates. So I'm not going to give you a rough quote because you could have just like an EP, and an EP is going to be different than an LP, right? I mean, comfortably, you're going to be looking at over $1,000, definitely. So, I mean, that's acceptable in pressed records or plate guys. It's just how many quantity you're going to get. Yeah. Anybody else have questions? Yeah.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
My first one is how, like, because record pressing plants are incredibly expensive.
Yep.
And lathes are incredibly expensive.
Yep.
So how come there's so many bootleg vinyls?
From the 70s or right now?
Like, just like throughout the 70s to now.
I mean, people would take, a lot of those were private press, so people would just steal plates, make plates. It was way easier in the 70s to do whatever you wanted. There was no real oversight. There was no barcodes. So people couldn't track records and songs and intellectual property as much as they could, so as they can now. So, I mean, yeah, lathes are expensive, but I mean, lacquers used to be readily in abundance and you could cut and smash all day and it was no problem. So, I mean, bootlegging is still very much a thing, especially in some lathe operators' minds because they're able to charge a higher price point for somebody else's music. And some of us are more ethical. So that's, yeah.
And then the second question is, because of the fact that lathes probably aren't going to be like $1,000, is there a way that you can get, is there a way that you can get individual pieces and kind of build up from there? Or
so most lathes that are creating masters for record pressing were built in the 40s and the 50s, and there hasn't been a new lathe built since then. So those lathes are $250,000. The parts are not readily available. The guys that run those lathes, and I do say guys as the correct usage, that there are mostly men doing this job. I am one of 9 women in the world that cut records. Up until 6 months ago, I was the only woman in Canada that was cutting records. So it is very much a male-dominated industry. Some of those guys know machine shop people. We all have a vast network of mechanical people. We're getting parts CNC'd. We're getting them 3D printed because those things are very old and the people that make them, maintain them are not very accessible. They live in Germany. They are dead. So you kind of have to learn how to maintain your machine and how to love and care for it as you work with it. Mine is probably the most updated punk rock version because it's a desktop lathe. It can be tricked out so I can cut masters. I just don't want to because the pressure of cutting a lacquer is crippling. It is forever. There is no takesies backsies. This piece of not plastic is $275 a side. So to create the most perfect, and this is the most perfect, I mean, not this one because I've put my grubby hands all over it, but the lacquer copy of your record is the most perfect copy that you'll ever have. And that's why they cost a lot of money. Lacquers have a very great frequency response because they're malleable, a little bit better than this. So you can sometimes hear the difference between something that's been direct to metal mastered and something that's been lacquer cut because the frequency response in metal doesn't have a really great low end, lacquer does.
So, and then, are acetate records similar?
Yep, that's a lacquer.
Okay, yeah.
Yep, and that's why they degrade so fast. So I mean, you get like maximum like 10 or 15 plays out of it, and then it's toast. Yeah. Do you have a question? Oh, okay. So yeah, once you get this lacquer cut, it goes to get plated, which is like a beautiful silvering process, and they turn into, not this guy, but this guy, which is a mother. Wow. And then this is the copy that stays at the pressing plant. So if you ever need to reorder and get more copies of your record made, this is what they make it from to make this stamper. So there's multiple ways to do the stamper process. There's 2 steps, there's 3 steps. So you get more of these parts and it's more money, obviously. But then if something goes wrong with this stamper in the machine, like, I don't know, 20,000 PSI on a teeny tiny piece of metal, do you think anything could ever go wrong with that? No, of course not. So if this stamper gets damaged, the only way, if you have extra stampers, sometimes you'll get another couple sets of stampers, these only last for about 500 to 1,000 copies. And then they're burned out. So if you think about Our Ladies, Taylor, and Adele to do 200,000 copies of that one record. They needed a bunch of these and a bunch of these. And they cut it about 25 times. So 25 lacquers to make 50 stampers and 50 mothers, and then just hope that it all goes correctly. And then they stay at the pressing plant so that they can make more. Because when you ultimately sell your record out and you want to make more of them, then you can go, hey, yeah, rerun those. And they'll be like, okay, and they'll make you another one. Or you can call me, and I'll be like, no problem, I've got your files still. Cut it into plastic, here you go.
I've got a merch question.
Yeah.
So on the ground on, venue level tour acts.
Yep.
We see differentiation in what merch sells.
Yep.
We know the metal guys buy more t-shirts.
So,
Is there a noticeable trend for markets on who's buying more vinyl?
vinyl's kind of across the board, everybody wants it. So, I mean, you'll see bands bring their entire catalog or just the new one. I mean, sometimes it depends on how many they have or what their allocation was from their labels, sometimes too. Sometimes they'll do a run just for the tour as well. So, I mean, I've only seen a couple of tours that don't have records, and that was just because they sold out of them.
So in sales, there's no differentiation between a country act versus a hip hop act versus
Not really. I mean, country does less records. I mean, now you're gonna, like, Morgan Wallen is a totally different category of person. Because he's got like a triple record and all 36 songs are on the top 100 right now. So he's selling records like they can't even keep them in the shop. But then like smaller touring country acts don't, most of their people, and this is funny, most of the people, because tractors still have CD players.
Okay.
Actually. So country population is still making a lot of CDs because their infrastructure to support CD sales. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's my talk. If anybody has any other questions.